Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com and I am finally here with the Simon Says Stamp May card kit. I received this a little bit ago and I must say it was a bit of a challenge to work with, so this video took a little longer than expected, but I'm going to be sharing 10 cards with the kit today. So here I'm just showing the kit. I'm going to try to make this part pretty fast because you can go online and see what's in the kit. Simon Says is pretty good about actually showing you all the different papers and things like that. And so it has these animation stamps from Uchi Designs, and honestly that was to me the most intriguing part of the kit and the reason that I wanted to give it a try, because I had seen these animation stamps released at the Craft and Hobby Association show. I forget what it's called now, like Creativation. But anyway, I'd seen them when they were released and they looked like fun to use, so I was excited for the chance to try those out. And then it came with those 2 watercolor cards, which I thought were like really pretty, and I liked those a lot. And then some other stuff that was a little bit less exciting to me. There are those Illustrated Faith clear things. I honestly don't even know what to call them. And then there's a bunch of Illustrated Faith paper. And I'm a fan of Illustrated Faith and I've actually bought stuff from them before, but it was a little interesting in a card kit because all these different patterned papers, they're solid on one side, and then the other side has these prints, but a lot of them have specific Bible verses on them, like the verse names. And for me, that's a little troublesome only because I can't send anything with any sort of Bible references to Cards for Hospitalized Kids, and that's where I send a lot of my cards. So it really, to me, felt a little restricting to have the Bible verses on the cards, or the verse names and numbers on the cards. And then there's some cardstock and these fine line markers from Crayola. And at first, again, I was a little bit like, why in this card kit are markers that I could like go pick up at Target? To me, that was a little bit disappointing, but I realized like that might not be true for everyone, especially like internationally. Maybe this would be a little bit more interesting. But anyway, I wanted to give them a shot. I wanted to watercolor with them because, knowing that they're Crayola markers, I know they're water-based. And so what I did was I scribbled a little bit of the marker onto a clear block. You could use a piece of clear packaging, a craft mat, anything that would resist it, and then added a bit of water and just used it like watercolor paint, which is like not super exciting to me because I have really nice watercolor paints, but these were pretty colors and they did do nice watercoloring. They honestly worked a little better than I expected them to, and I saw that other people put them directly to paper and then used either a water brush or a brush with water on it and sort of blended them out. I was a little hesitant to do that because the only thing with these watercolor pieces is you only get one. It's not a stamp that you have that you could stamp more of. And I could create something similar with stamps I own. However, you get one of sheets for this. And this is printed on the Tim Holtz Ranger watercolor paper, which I like because it's bright white, but it isn't a watercolor paper that you can work too much. You can't get it too wet or it starts to pill up a bit, which was fine because I'm not adding a lot of water in this particular instance. I have a, just damp brush and I'm able to pull the watercolor out with that. And that was another reason that I wanted to pick it up off the block instead of going directly to paper, because if I went directly to paper and I wanted to smooth it out and blend it really well, I could wind up adding too much water and then pilling the paper. And again, you really only get one shot at these. So I wanted to play, and I did color both of the 2 watercolor sheets with the markers and with this method. However, this part of the video is sped up to 2 times right now. And as you can see, it's kind of a slow process still. I don't look like I'm painting particularly fast, even though it's already double speed. And so to color these cactuses and the flamingo did take quite a while. But again, I think that they turned out pretty. I like the colors. I was able to mix it up a little bit here on the cactuses. So even though all the cactuses, of course, are green, I was able to get some shading, making certain areas darker. And I was able to use a couple other different fun colors on the pots. But I wanted to show you how you could add a little bit of detail with the markers themselves. So now I'm not really using them as watercolors anymore, but just as markers. And all of my watercoloring is dry, and I'm going in and adding details, like making the spots on the potted plant darker. Instead of having to watercolor that a bunch. I am just going direct to paper with the marker, and I'm doing that for some of the various dots. These are really fine tipped markers, which can be easy to work with in my opinion, because you can get into fine spaces, but then of course watercoloring you can fill a whole large space with them. I don't necessarily think that I would color direct to paper with these markers, just because, you know, my experience with Crayolas is that you get a very clear line. They would be very different than, say, a Copic marker, for obvious reasons, since a 12-pack costs what like one Copic marker costs. But they were great for adding the details, like, you know, making those spines really stand out, just taking the green marker right to the paper. And I do something very similar with the flamingo. Once I finish coloring it in, I trace over some of the lines in the marker colors that I used, and they're going to come out darker because they're not watered down. I also added a couple of details with some glossy accents, but if you're going to use glossy accents, you will want to make sure that your watercoloring parts are completely dry, because glossy accents can make water-based things react. So I find it helpful for it to be completely dry before adding anything like that. And also, as I add them to the cardstock, they are the traditional Tim Holtz size. Is exactly the size of a card base. And so there's really not a lot of room for embellishment because they take up the whole area. I thought the sayings were fine. I'll definitely can use the thinking of you for a donation card, but you know, also just to send. And so I liked that they were pretty versatile sentiments. They weren't too restrictive. But they are also the only sentiments in the set. The stamp set, while really fun and cute because it's an animation set, does not have any sentiments. So I added, like I said, some little details. Here's the glossy accent detail. I'm not even using the fine tip on this, although you can use a fine tip on your glossy accents as well. But I find that generally the regular tip does just fine. And I also added a little bit of faux stitching detail by basically just adding black lines that look like stitching. And you can see the pen I was using there was an Illustrated Face pen, because as I said, I own their products and I like the design of them. It's just that it didn't work as well for cards for me personally. But I also thought that it was interesting because I didn't really understand how the watercolor markers, the Crayola markers, really, and these watercolor panels matched up with everything else that was going on in the set. It just didn't seem super coordinated. But I wanted to figure out how to use these plastic sheets, I guess. They're not stickers. They kind of seem like stickers at first, but they're really thick. You could make shaker cards with them, and that'd be kind of cool to have some stuff shaking behind them. And you could use the plastic of them the same way you would use any plastic on a shaker card. I think that's a fun idea too. But again, the card kit doesn't come with any shaker supplies, or, you know, there's no die cuts, and so I wind up having to add a lot to this kit, which is fine because most people who are purchasing these kits have a lot of supplies. But it's definitely not a beginner card kit, I would say, because I think as a beginner I would get pretty frustrated with this kit. So in the box there are some ideas, and I like that about Simon Says Stamp. They do give you some ideas for how to use the kit. There's a lot of people who there's usually a blog hop when the kit comes out, and one of the ideas was to take these numbers and to create a strip across the card that was clear and see-through. Since the numbers are see-through, you could then see into the card. And I thought that was a fun idea, but some people had mentioned that they didn't really understand how, over in the Stamp Junkies group that I'm part of at Facebook, they said they didn't really understand how they attached it. So that's what I kind of wanted to answer here. So basically I took an A2 size card base, and then I cut 1.5 inches from the top. And I cut a 1-inch strip for the bottom. And the numbers are going to fill in the rest of the front of the card. So you see here that I am lining up, I have that 1.5 inches on the top. I glued this clear number thing to that top, and now I'm going to glue on the 1-inch strip that goes on the bottom, and I'm basically going to line it up with a different card base so that I can see that it's going to still be an A2 size front of a card. So I hope that seeing it makes more sense because it's a little bit difficult to explain. But basically that's a 1 inch by 5.5 inch strip that I just placed over the rest of the numbers. Now when you look at the inside of the card, you see all that extra stuff that's glued down. And you can cover that up with just some strips of white cardstock that are cut to just slightly smaller, like maybe 1/8 of an inch on each side, smaller than the 1 inch strip and the 1.5 inch strip that makes up the top and the bottom of the card. But basically you're just gluing that clear piece onto the inside of the card and then covering up the inside of the card with more white cardstock just to give it a little bit more finish. Of course you could skip that step. You don't have to cover up the inside. It's just that it maybe will make it look a little bit more finished for those who would personally prefer that look. And again, this is not really my idea. It's something that I saw in the card kit inspiration. And if I was trying to change it up a bit more, I think what I would do is make a shaker card with it. But since there wasn't a lot of shaker stuff going on in the card kit, that's why I avoided it. But here I'm going to cover up that bit of area. And I'm then going to try to add some pattern paper to this card. And I went back to the pattern papers and I didn't really want to use the solid side. But like I said, if I was going to donate these cards, and I do want to donate a few of these cards, I can't use anything with the psalm numbers on it or, Bible book numbers on it. So I noticed that this sunglass paper, I could cut strips of it and avoid the words that are on it. So that's what I basically decided to do. So you have that 1.5 inch strip on the top and the 1 inch strip on the bottom. And I'm going to do what I traditionally do with a card and give it a 1/4 inch border. So the 1 inch would be down to, I guess, 1/2 inch by 5 1/4. No, by 5. And that would give it a 1/4 inch on each side. It's a little bit different of a measurement, but basically you just want to cut it slightly smaller than whatever you wind up using. I usually recommend a 1/4 of an inch. You could go as small as 1/8 of an inch depending on what you like for your layers. And then for the top, I found it a little bit harder to find a sheet that I could just make a strip of. Like the sunglasses there, that was fine because I only needed a small strip. But now that I need like a 1 1/4 to 1 inch width of strip, I'm going to need something that works a little better. And this blue paper here, the backside was literally just Bible books and citations. And so I knew I had no purpose for that. So I was like, I'm going to turn it over and use the solid. But honestly, that was a little bit disappointing because for the amount that you pay for the kit, you really don't want to be paying just for solid paper. So I would have liked a little bit more versatile pattern paper for sure. And so now I'm going to stamp a sentiment. As I mentioned, there are no sentiments in this whole stamp kit, this card kit. So I had to pull something else in from my stash. And I find that I pull a lot of stuff in from my stash to make these cards successful, which again is totally fine because most people have a lot of stuff in their stash. But this is the Create a Smile Just Saying Hello stamp set. I find that I use this one a ton because there's a couple of different size hellos. They're all larger, but they're still a little bit varied. Some are thicker, some are thinner. There's scripty ones and more plain text ones. And so I find this to be a pretty versatile set. I do think that the numbers would work well for a birthday card too, especially you could isolate the number that a child is turning. But I was looking for some cards for donating. So now I'm ready to use the animation stamps. And this is the part of the kit that I'm actually really excited for. And I was super fortunate that Uchi's Designs actually sent me some extra animation grids and some extra stamps and dies to work with, and I will be doing more about that and showing you the haul, etc. in the future. However, what was really nice about it was that it meant that I got to experiment and figure out the best way, or hopefully a helpful way for you to use your kit with these extras. And so basically I learned how to make these cards without using anything from the kit, and then I could go in and show you how to best utilize the kit stuff. So in the kit, you get one full animation sheet and then one partial animation sheet, and a full one is 4x6. And that's when you order from Uchi's Designs, you get a 4x6 animation sheet. And I am going to be cutting that in just a moment, but the piece that I'm working with now is one of those Illustrated Faith designs. I picked one that didn't have any Bible references on it, and I cut it to 4 by 5 3/4. And I'm going to do a blog post, and I'm going to write down these measurements, and I'm also going to link you to the Uchi's Designs website where you can learn to make them, because that's how I learned to make these. So you're going to score it at 1/4 inch and at 2 3/4 inches. So 1/4 inch, then go 2 3/4 more, score it again, so that you create 2 3/4 twice, so it can fold over onto itself, and then there's that 1/4 inch for a flap to tuck underneath. Then, starting at the 1/4 inch score mark, you're going to measure 1/2 inch up from that 1/4 inch score mark. You're going to draw a straight line across. Then the rest of, between that that 1/2 inch line, the 1/2 inch thick line you just drew there, and the top where it's scored again, you want to make an X. And in the middle of the X is where your circle die is going to go. You could use a square die, oval, etc., etc. However, you do want it. So here I'm like kind of fussing around and writing the measurements so that like I could get this all straight in my brain, because I'm going to do 3 of these. And you put the circle die in the middle, and then I have a very small slider die that I got from Uchi's Designs, but I think that you could use another small slider die if you have one of those sets, or a small rectangle, or cut a rectangle. But basically you just want a small rectangle along that 1/2 inch line and a circle in the middle where your animation is going to go. And the reason that I'm making this with like a small slider here is because you're provided these 4 by 6 inch pieces of paper, so why not utilize them? And also because you can make, out of that one 4 by 6 inch piece of animation grid, you can make 3 of these, which means you can make 3 cards. And then you can use the last partial animation grid for 1 large card, and you can make 4 animation cards with just the 2 animation grids. And I thought that was helpful to know, like, how to get as many animation cards as you can out of this kit, because once you've used the animation grids, you can't use the animation stamps anymore. Like, they only work with the grids. So I wanted you to be able to make as many as you can, and so hopefully this is helpful. So here you're going to create the pocket where the animation grid is going to sit and be able to slide back and forth over your image. And so you want to use some foam tape on the edges so that there's room for that animation grid to slide. So here's the full 4 by 6 sheet. And I'm going to cut it, instead of being 4 inches wide, I'm going to cut it down to 3 inches wide so that it has some room to sort of wiggle around inside of this pocket that I'm creating. And I'm going to cut it to the 2 inch. So 4 by 6 is going to turn into 3 by 6 and then 3 by 2. And you have 3 3 by 2 pieces to make 3 of these. Now it's time to stamp the animation stamp. And you can use these animation stamps without it, but you'll see that they look kind of interesting. Like, they don't really look like much of anything. I think the sunglasses one's probably the most versatile outside of animation. But what you want to do is you need to make sure that the animation stamp is lined up with the lines being straight, so that when the grid slides over it, it's able to cover up the areas and create the effect. And if it's not straight, if it's stamped crooked, that becomes problematic. So the way to make sure that it's stamped straight is to take the stamp off and put it on its cover sheet and line it up, because the cover sheet is straight. And then you can either put your Misty Door down to pick it up, or you can pick it up with a clear block. But basically, you're just trying to make sure that the lines are straight up and down, these vertical lines that make up the stamp. So that way when you slide your animation grid over it, the animation grid lines up perfectly with those lines. So however that works for you to, have a ruler, have a grid mat. I think that the Misty's really easy, but I know not everyone has one. The biggest tip recommended was to still put it on top of the design sheet and just pick it straight up with your block, and you should still be pretty okay. However, there is a little bit of wiggle room once it's down. So basically, I have used the foam tape, pulled that up, and glued the flap down, and basically created like a little area that animation grid can slide around in there now. And the way to make the card work and slide is to add some foam tape into that slider shaft there at the bottom. And as you can see, if I pull the foam tape back and forth, it moves the animation grid over the animation stamp and animates it. And, you know, it's starting to move now. So it's a little bit of a fussy process the first couple of times you do it, but I've made 5 or 6 of these at this point, and it's gotten a lot faster over time. And I've used the same basic principle of creating a pocket for the animation, then attaching the animation on a little slider area. And you have to make sure that you have enough of the animation grid that it's going to cover your stamped image and also be underneath your slider cutout so that you can stick the foam tape onto the slider area. And then I decided to cover the slider area with a banner and a die cut heart. In the die set from Uchi's Designs, they just have the heart, and there's a much larger heart, but I thought the banner worked well for these smaller cards. And so once I make 3 of these, and I kind of carefully selected the Illustrated Faith paper that worked best for me to make these sliders with, I'm just going to basically glue them onto the backs of some of my less desirable Illustrated Faith papers and use them basically as solid papers. And there'll be A2 size cards with these animation grids in the center. I'm not worried about making the cards super interesting, just because I think that the animation grid is pretty special in and of itself. So the fact they're on very basic cards I still think is okay. And I used the general hello sentiment, again from that Create a Smile Hello stamp set. I figured if I'm going to add a stamp set, let me use just one additional stamp set so that I'm not, using a whole bunch of extra products. Also, I used that Illustrated Faith pen to add faux stitching detail earlier, so I brought it out again, just, for a little added interest to the card without really, incorporating too much extra. So once you make 3 little animators, or animation pockets, or whatever you call them, you still have the one animation grid that comes in the stamp set package that kind of like it demos the product for you. And I'm going to use that to make a bigger card. So I'm going to get 4 animation cards in all, but this one I want to be like A2 size card so that when I stick it on the front of an A2 size card, there's like a 1/4 inch border and then, or an 1/8 of an inch around, but it's a 1/4 inch smaller. And, just to like be a full-size card, but there's no full-size pieces of pattern paper, so I'm going to use one of the pieces of the cardstock that comes in the kit. Because I decided not to use the cardstock for card bases. I think that it's kind of a waste in some ways. I buy really nice cardstock in bulk to use for card bases, so I would rather use this quality cardstock, because this is Simon Says Stamp cardstock and it's really nice. The white in this kit is actually the 120 pounds, so it's like super nice. And I just thought making a card base was kind of a waste for it, since I have quality card bases, like I said, that I buy in bulk. So here, the measurements are the large piece of green paper is 4 by 11, scored at 1/2 inch, and then scored at 5 1/4 inch from there, which would be 6 1/4 inch from the end. Basically, after you have the 1/2 inch line, the rest of it just gets folded in half so that it covers itself, and that 1/2 inch is just a tab. Then you want to, from the score line, measure, from that bottom score line, that 1/2 inch score line, measure a 1/2 inch up and another 1/2 inch up, so that you create a 1/2 inch channel for you to put your slider piece in. So that's where that slider piece is taped, and then again make that X from score line to the place where you're putting your slider channel. I hope that makes sense. Again, gonna link you to Uchi's Designs because I think that their website was very helpful in learning how to make these, even if you don't buy the dies. Because the only die I am using from their die set is that little slider die. And again, you could just cut a rectangle, use a small rectangle, use another slider die, etc., etc. Again, to line up the stamp, make sure that the lines are straight. I take it off of its backing sheet and I line it up with its pre-stamped design on the front. Then I can position it and use my MISTI door to sort of close on top of it, make sure it's straight, and then stamp down. If you only have clear blocks, you can do the same exact thing. I think the MISTI is great for these animation stamps because if you don't stamp perfectly, they don't work nearly as well, so you really do want to get a great image. But some sort of stamp positioner, definitely super helpful on these. And I am using VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which is a really nice dark ink, but it does take a while to dry, so you don't want to be touching it too much afterwards. And there I'm just showing you what this cactus looks like. It looks like a little cactus dancing, which is super cute. And I'm basically gluing it all up the same way. I trimmed down the animation grid so that it fits inside. You do want to give it enough room to move back and forth. It shouldn't be exactly the size of the inside or you won't be able to move it left and right. So you have to make it a little bit smaller. So if you have like a 3-inch there, you probably want to take like 1/4 to 1/2 inch at least off. The more you take off, the more you can slide it across. However, of course, it needs to be at least as wide as the circle and a little bit more, because if it's just as wide as the circle when you move it, then, there's not going to be any animation grid to go across the corners of the circle. So it's a little bit of a delicate balance, but you can make the measurement pretty easy and kind of fuss with it as you go. Most important thing to remember is the animation grid needs to be long enough to cover from the top of your circle to the bottom of your slider channel. Wherever you put them on the card, it needs to cover both of that, because making it attached to the slider is how you're able to make it move in the end. So again, I'm just going to cut a little banner. I'm going to attach that. In the slider channel, I use foam tape again, but this time it's doubled, because if you only used one layer of foam tape, it'd be a little harder to move across, because it would be just as thick as that card pocket underneath that you have the animation stamp in. And in this instance, I thought, well, I don't even have to add an extra layer like before I put the banner and the heart. This time I thought, well, since my banner's a little thicker, I can actually just use the hello from the stamp set and attach that. So you'll see the complete card there at the end, but I basically just put it on some white cardstock from there, kept it simple. Here is the most challenging part of the kit. These designs on these plastic sheets. And there's some really cute designs. And I thought, well, you could put sticky on the back of them and cut them out. But then they're basically stickers. And so, like, why aren't they just stickers? Again, I don't know what the original purpose for these are. And I probably should have just done some research. I think it has to do with the fact that, like, you want clear things in your Bible so you can still read it. And so if you attach these in the Bible, then, like, that's why you want them to be clear. But it was like if they were stickers, then you wouldn't be able to lift them up. And these you could tape down and lift up. I think that's the thought. But I'm basically trying to cut out circles with these images in it, because I thought, well, I could do something similar like I did with the numbers card, where I could die cut this and then sandwich it between the card base and some pattern paper, and then you'll be able to like see through to the inside of the card, and that's a little bit fun and interesting. So one thing I did appreciate about this kit is, even though it was pretty difficult to work with, I feel like I learned how to make different kinds of cards that I've never tried to make before. Like even though that number card was so simple, and again, not my idea, not trying to take credit for it, it did cause me to, learn a little bit more about a different way of making a card. Try something I hadn't tried in the past, and maybe could try again with something similar. But here, I'm having like a really hard time die cutting this because it's so thick. However, I realized that there's actually like a film on top of it, and that makes sense because it's protecting the designs, because once you peel the film up, it's like shinier. And I think that, shipping and, having it handled in your craft stash could scratch the designs that are on here. So the plastic film is to protect it until you're kind of like ready to go with it. And I think that was part of what was making it harder to cut. So you might want to take the film off before you try to cut it. Just a thought. Not sure how much it would help, but they were a little bit difficult to cut. So I've kind of just put those 2 circle cut pieces to the side, thinking like, all right, I'll figure out how to use them, but, not really quite knowing what my purpose is. I have this last sheet of the Illustrated Faith that has the numbers on it that also doesn't have any like Bible stuff on it. So I'm like, I could use this for a card for the kids. So maybe that's how I use it. And sorry, this is going to be a little bit rambly part of the video, but I wanted to show this because I think that so many people looked at this kit and were really confused and really felt like, why don't I know how to use this? And so I just kind of wanted to assure you that you're not alone. It is a little bit of a weird kit. So I'm like covering up the blessed and the sunglasses with tape and basically cutting them out to, again, just use as a sticker, essentially, because then I'm going to peel the tape off and stick it down, and then it's just going to be back to a clear sticker. But they're not clear stickers, because I know some people, again, they said when they got the kit they thought they were stickers and then tried to peel them off and it didn't work. So I thought, well, this blessed sentiment I could probably use as like an actual card sentiment. So I'm trimming that up, getting it ready. This heart thing, like with the animation stamp in it, it's just sort of to inspire you to how to use the animation stamps, but it doesn't actually have a plastic animation grid. Instead, it's just die cut. And so it kind of makes me wonder if they're going to release die cuts in the future that you can use to make your own animation type grids, because buying animation grid sheets could be a little expensive after a while. So this is the part where I discover there's plastic on top of these, and I try to like peel it off to make it shinier. And so they look a little bit different after you peel that off. And I was like, maybe I do just layer them, but maybe I can still figure out how to make these window cards, and that's what you usually call like when you can see through a card, a window card. Or that's what I mean by it anyway. So I noticed that I have this die cut heart sitting on my desk that if I were to put it over the heart circle there, you would be able to create a window. So I'm taking this gray paper and this number paper. I'm layering it together, and I'm using some painter's tape to tape it down to the card. And then I'm going to try to die cut through all of the layers with this heart. I'm not taping the papers down yet because I do want to sandwich that plastic piece in between the card base and the pattern paper. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm taking the tape to go around the edges of the heart die cut. I'm positioning this plastic piece over it so that way you can see through like a window. It's a little bit clear, but it also has the heart pattern on it. And I'm going to, again, glue this pattern paper on top of it. I do add a little bit of extra adhesive around the window itself, just so that sticks nicely, doesn't come up in the mail or anything. And here I've managed to actually figure out how to create a window card with these, and feeling kind of proud of myself at this point because I had all but given up on that idea. And then I'll just add the blessed sentiment there. But again, it's really just going to act as a sticker, and it is what it is at this point. And I'm sorry if these weren't the most like inspired or interesting cards for this kit, but I do know that a lot of people were asking for like, what are your ideas for this card kit? And looking for some thoughts out there. So hopefully this helps. And I'm really trying to use up the card kit, so I'm like trying to figure out how am I going to get these sunglasses on there. But I think I need to accept that I've done a pretty good job. I've used up most of the things in the card kit at this point. And I was pretty proud of how I came up with 4 animation cards with so little of the grids that came in the kit. But very excited that Uchi's Design provided me with extra ones, because honestly, that was definitely the most fun part of the kit. Was the animation stamps. And so I recommend, even if you said no to this card kit, to go over to Uchi's Designs and pick up some animation stamps to play with, because that was definitely the most fun part. Here again, I have that gray die cut heart from when I die cut that window for the other card, so I'm gonna just try to use it up, and it pairs well with this heart animation stamp thingy that came with the card kit as inspiration. I'll use the hello set from Create a Smile once again to stamp a little hello, just sort of layer up some scraps. The yellow is just a little piece that came from trimming another cardstock piece up, and layer it all together and make basically another fun animation card, but with the animation thing that they provided for you, as opposed to using one of the sheets. And again, I keep it pretty simple because it does have the fun animation element, and because there's not a lot of embellishments in the kit, trying to stick a little bit to what's in the kit, although I've added so much extra at this point. And I do pop up part of the heart because that slider piece is a little bit thick and I didn't want it to look all lumpy and bumpy. And I'm going to add another bit of faux stitching detail. As you can see here, my ATG gun is like my best friend. I use it constantly. I go through like a roll of tape a week. And I think that it's relatively cheap. There's some couple of different places that have been recommended to me online to pick up that tape pretty cheap. So when you make a bunch of cards like I do, you definitely need some affordable adhesive. So here are my 10 cards. Finally, now that we're like 35 minutes into this video. But they were some pretty intense cards because there's all this animation cool stuff going on. And again, there will be a coordinating blog post with some more details on that. I'm going to show you how some of these animate because that's what makes these cards so cool. Still pictures don't quite capture it. But after I show you all the cards, there's going to be some still pictures as well. And that's basically going to be it for my video today. I hope that you enjoyed this look at the card kit, that you got some inspiring ideas, that you learned a little bit about some of the products. As I mentioned, I'll link to Uchi's Designs so you get more details on their stamps. Thanks to Uchi's Designs for providing me some additional sliders so that I could provide you better and more helpful information about how to make slider cards. I'll probably do an exclusive animation slider card video just on that so that the people who didn't want to sit through this 38-minute or 36-minute Simon Says Kit video can still check those out. I will also leave you links in the video description to, various social media, but also, my Facebook group, which is Critter Loving Card Makers. It's a pretty fun group where you can share critter cards, and there's some fun critter parts of this set. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave those down below. I try to respond as much as I can to comments. And I will also leave you links to the products that are still available as of this recording. The Simon Says Stamp Kit is still available. And I'll also just link you to the Uchi's Design store in case you want to try animation stamps, but a different set than these. Alright, so after all of that, thank you so much for sticking through this, and have an awesome day. Bye.